Hello there, folks. Continuing to try desperately to catch up on commissioned reviews. And today we have something that I have been trying to get to for a while. It is a show from 2020, one season, limited run, Dispatches from Elsewhere. This this is a odd show. And it's a show that is probably not going to land right for everybody. Some people are actually probably going to find it forcibly quirky, annoyingly pretentious, any number of things. I really liked it, mostly. I'll get to that. But this is a show that it is unabashedly strange and slightly off-putting in its presentation, in its story, in kind of obfuscating where it's going. And it does so in a way that hits just right for me. Because this kind of thing where it's like, ooh, the presentation's a little bit weird and the story's a little bit mysterious and the characters, ooh, that's a little quirky, isn't it? Like, that can grate on me real quick. Like, some of the movies and whatnot that I detest the most that I've seen are ones that I would consider to be forcibly quirky. So this would be stuff like Garden State, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, which I cannot stand. That movie is full of people who aren't characters with quirks. They are walking quirks. They aren't people. That's not the case here. And this is the big thing. These characters are very much, very, very, very deliberately, in a way that actually might even be a little too on the nose, but for me it worked. They are humanized. They have quirks. They have oddities, but they are people. And that's really emphasized super hard with the way the first 4 of these 10 episodes are done. So you have your 4 primary characters. That's Peter, Simone, Janice, Fredwin. I'll go through them in a little bit. But each one focuses on a different one of those characters, and they all start with the pseudo-narrator, played by the amazing Richard E. Grant, who is so good. Everybody's really good in this. But his voice is just, it's the glue that holds so much of this together. But he opens everyone talking about these characters, but he doesn't just start telling you things about them. He says, say with instance, with Peter, imagine that Peter is you. And then talks about specific aspects of Peter that most people will be able to relate to. Peter is you if you feel like you have been walking on a treadmill for years and it's one you got on willingly, and things like that. So, under other circumstances, it is possible that this kind of thing would be looked at as very lazy, because rather than simply presenting the characters in a way that the audience will find the thing that they connect with and just relate to them, you're telling them how to relate to the characters. But the thing is, again, the presentation of the overall story is weird enough that I think giving a very straightforward way for you to connect to these characters so that they anchor you through this weird story, I think was a very smart idea. Aside from the fact that they are incredibly well played and incredibly understandable, incredibly human characters. So there's Peter, played by Jason Segel, who also wrote some of the scripts and is an executive producer on the show. He's kind of, I think he gets credited as creator on this, sort of. It's somewhat inspired by actual events. It's weird. I'm not going to get into the whole history of the making of it. But Peter is a guy who's just kind of moving absent-mindedly through his life, and his life doesn't change. It is very static, and he has a very stable but very dull and a bit lonely. And then there is Simone, who is a trans woman, played by an actress who I'm not familiar with. I'll put the name up. She's wonderful. I hope I get to see her in more things in the future. Simone is incredibly well played, and I think the most insightful thing that's there is that she's clearly at a point in her life where she's out. She's gone through, if not all, at least the majority of the major things involved in her transitions. If she had surgery, she's probably had them. She's clearly been on hormones for a while. She's out publicly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But she's still not completely happy. There's still things that weigh her down. And what I love about it is it seems to understand that, like, yes, she needed to do this. This was important for her to do. But that doesn't suddenly make everything better. That doesn't suddenly satisfy her creative angst. That doesn't suddenly make her not lonely. And you can tell she kind of thought it would, but it didn't. Then there's Janice, played by Sally Field, who is just kind of adorable in this, and she brings a wonderful sense of experience, and not just by her presence and age, but like you can tell this is a woman who has settled into what she expects to be the last leg of her life, but who has been and gone through many things over the course of that life, and who she is now is probably not who she would have thought, and actually that gets called out very specifically in terms of how her younger self would think of her now, and it's another thing that could be really cheesy, but it's presented very well. Then there was the one that acting was surprised me quite a bit. So there's Fredwin. Fredwin is played by Andre 3000 from Outcast, who has been acting off and on for a little bit, but I've never seen him in anything before. He's really good in this. He's really good. And Fredwin, let's go with Fredwin is a lot. He is intense. And he can come across as heartless. He doesn't mean to, but boy can he. And he is trying, but he's also very lost in his own head in a lot of ways. Now, what brings these four people together is this sort of AGR game, this sort of city spanning, people answer these weird posted ads, and they get pulled into this thing where like there's this institute and this organization, and supposedly there's a missing girl, and these four people end up on a team together, and it's constructed as a game, this thing that they're doing, but each of the four of them approach it very differently. Peter approaches it from the perspective of, this is something that is giving me a spark in my life that I have not felt for a long time. Simone is approaching it from the perspective of someone with an appreciation for art. Like, oh, look at all the work that went into this. Oh, this is clever. Janice just approaches it as a game. For her, it's just meant to be fun. It's just something for her to do with her time so that she's not home all the time. And Fredwin takes all of it incredibly seriously to the point of definitely overthinking it and overcommitting to a lot of what's going on. And the four of them, the four performers and the four characters, have really great chemistry, and they play off of each other really well, because these are four incredibly distinct people, but they fit together to work and function as a team, or clash and butt heads as a team. And it moves through this oddness going on around them as they try to figure out how much of this is real. Is this all made up? How much of this is us figuring out a layer behind what's actually going on? Or is what we're seeing actually intended to be part of this experience? What they take away from it, what that means to them, the connections they build with each other. It's all really, really well done. Kind of up until the very end. I'm not going to get into spoilers quite yet. I am going to have to at the end. But so the ending doesn't ruin it. I want to emphasize that. At least it didn't for me. But the ending did sort of shift its focus, because the show, by and large, if I were to point to its thematic core, it's about the connections between people. It's about how those connections get made, how they get strengthened, how they fall apart, and the ways in which some people really need to relearn what their connections are. There's a bit said by Richard E. Grant's character, Octavio, towards the very end that was beautifully put. I don't know if I can convey why this line worked, but he said, like, what is amazing about you isn't that you're unique. What's amazing about you is that you are us and we are all the same. Sort of making this comparison to a glass of water, and there's a fish tank, and taking some of the water into the glass and taking it out and say, that is you. And you are now separate, but you are still the same. And that feeling of interconnectedness and driving home the idea that that is important, that matters. That's what the show is about for most of it until the very last episode, where it becomes about something much more specific. And again, I can't get into it, but it narrows its focus onto one of the characters in a way that kind of undermines a bit of what it had done before. But at the same time, like, it also seems fully aware of that it's not an accident. It's weird. I'm going to have to talk about it in spoilers. But even with a slightly wonky ending, and again, does not derail the whole thing, but it is a little bit, I still really enjoyed this. And I would encourage anybody who thinks anything I mentioned sounds intriguing and is at a point, like this came out in 2020, fittingly enough, anyone who feels like they need to be reminded of the importance of human connections. Yeah, it's good. I'm going to need to talk about spoilers because I have to unpack the ending a little bit. So you've been warned. Okay. So the ending gets very meta because the final episode is focused on one of the people involved. Not one of the characters, but one of the people. Because the way episode 9 of 10 ends, it seems like it's going to focus on Peter. But you get to episode 10 and it's not focused on Peter, it's focused on Jason Segel, the actor and writer and performer who has historically had a bit of a drinking problem and is trying to recover from that. It's about him. And even aside from sort of the inherent meta-ness of suddenly becoming about the creator / one of the writers / one of the lead performers of the show, even setting aside whether or not that meta-ness just is too much, just that sudden narrowing of focus down into one person's experience felt off. Not that the show hadn't narrowed down onto individual experiences, but it had done so for multiple people. And then suddenly to do so for Jason at the very end and frame it in a way that's like, and this is why the show exists, because these are the things that have been on his mind. Well, it's a bit wanky. But the thing is, the show seems to know that. It calls it out incredibly directly. People in the show tell Jason Segel to his face, I think this ending is a bit crap. And I think you kind of disappeared up your own butt at the end. So it's not a mistake. It knows what it's doing. The question is how much that alleviates the issue. I think it does at least a little bit. But I don't think vanishing up your own rear end and then going, hey, look at me, my head's up my ass. I don't think that completely fixes the fact that your head's up your ass, but it is reassuring to know that, well, at least you understand that. At least you know that's what you did. Self-awareness can count for a lot, especially in something like this. But at the same time, it's an odd choice. But then again, I don't know how many times I've said then again, it doesn't completely lose that connection. That stuff that I mentioned earlier from Octavio about the water separate but the same, that is in the last episode. And so, and it's after, like, all this stuff with Jason Segel. And there's other stuff towards the end that's, for lack of a better way to put it, sort of audience participation. That still landed well for me. And I mean, part of the inherent problem is, like, I don't have a suggestion of what a better way to end this would be. I don't know how you end a story like this. That's part of the problem of trying to tell stories like this. How do you end it? It's not easy to know how to wrap up a story that is presented in this way. So it's not like I can suggest a better way to have done it. Let me be clear about that. But in some ways, it also made me question some of what had come earlier. I think the first 4 episodes are the strongest. There is still good stuff that comes later, but when the emphasis is on who these people are, why they are drawn towards this game and each other, it is at its absolute best. Later on, as the plot kicks in a little bit more, some of the cracks start to show, starting with a character named Clara. First of all, side note, there's a character called Commander 14 who refers to Clara, and he's got an accent not too far off from Peter Capaldi's, so hearing him talk about Clara, I kept hearing the 12th Doctor. It was so weird. But anyways, she's a character who's talked about a lot, sort of being, this creative spark and inspiration, and she could lead the world to great things. And it's the kind of character that is almost always a letdown when they actually get presented and you see them, because the way they're talked about, they can't live up to. But it's not such a disconnect between how they're talked about and how they are that it feels like a deliberate subversion. It's just you couldn't actually have a performer embody everything that other characters say that this person is, just because nobody can do that. So, like, there's a little bit of that earlier on, and then some of the specifics about what we find out about Clara, that she's not even, like, or at least Clara, as we understood her, isn't quite even real, but she's just just a specific artistic aspect of this other woman, and it didn't lose me through that, but, like, that's kind of where the meta wankiness starts, and then it culminates with Jason Segel going to Alcoholics Anonymous, talking about what's on his mind and getting inspired to write the script for the show you are now watching the finale of. And I do want to make it clear, like, even if this is a 10-episode personal therapy session for Jason Segel, I think it's a shockingly good result for a 10-episode personal therapy session for an actor. Because you can tell, whatever you think of the ending, he poured his heart into this. And the people who he got involved gave their all. So even with this weirdness that is the end, I am still really glad I watched this. And everything that comes before the end is gold. Honestly, I could probably rewatch this, end it, I don't know, 5 minutes before the end of episode 9, because that's the bit that leads into episode 10, and just wrap it up there and probably be very happy. Or maybe if I ever rewatch this, I'll actually watch episode 10 and it'll work better for me now that I know it's coming. But there's a lot of thoughtfulness in the understanding of people and connections, loneliness, why we need each other. And I don't think ultimately that that's lost by the ending. Dispatches from Elsewhere. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon is how I was commissioned to review this show. And you can support me at any tier. You get rewards for everything. The likes, shares, subscribes, those help me out as well. But don't worry too much about it. Take a relaxed attitude around here so you can just come on back next time you need a break. Now my thanks to my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Karak, The Thing That Goes Doink in the Anime, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Udelki,
The Oath the Boy, Bernobulax the Poodle, Zach, Idolin, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperole, Bookworm, Adam RDL Taylor, Shane Ross, Jay Gourlay, Brendan LaRose, and TT. If you want to hear me possibly butcher your name, check out the rewards on the Patreon. And thanks to all you folks.